Hello, Philippines, and welcome to the World News Jam right here on DZRJ and RJ TV. My name is Lecain, and we are here to talk about interesting stories going on from around the world. Now, this week, we have a very special guest. He's been on the show here quite a few times before. His name is Dan Kang. And Dan, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, but glad to be back. Glad to be back on the show. I'm glad to be back in the Philippines.
Yeah,
It's been a long time coming. We didn't know if we were ever this day was ever gonna come. Really.
I know. Because you were stuck there in Korea for a while because that's where you were from during the pandemic. Because I know we've talked about it a couple times. In fact, we even did a show during the pandemic from Korea.
We did. Yeah, I think
we did. I remember that. That was an interesting show. But you are now back in Manila, if I understand right.
That's correct.
Yeah, and Dan, in case people don't know, Dan is a Korean who's been working here in the Philippines. He's a businessman, been doing a lot of things in the Philippines to help the Philippines. And Dan, right now, besides all your businesses and things that you do, you're also currently doing some stuff in the Philippines to help young Filipinos in billiards.
That's correct. Yeah.
You're doing lots of tournaments and helping the young kids, sponsoring the young kids to get better in billiards.
That's correct. We Wild Blue Junior Team. That's Wild Blue. Was started by Nino Lopez and Leslie Makutai from Anito Kid, who's a very well-known billiard promoter here. And yeah, what we do is we have tryouts and we scout out outstanding, talented junior players under 18 around the country, and we put them through a test, and if they pass, then we sponsor them all through private donorship, out-of-pocket private donorship. And we've had a lot of donors, fortunately, supporting us, and so we train them, and then we enter them into tournaments around the nation. And part of the important protocols for them to be, this is a contract sponsorship. We supply high-end equipment and monetary support for them to travel around and into these tournaments. Is that they have to have good grades. Number one, they have to have an 80% or better in grades. They have to stay in school, and they have to stay out of trouble. Those are the main things that we
be in billiards and stay out of trouble.
That's right. Yeah.
That's tricky. Because it's interesting. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of people here in the Philippines and the people around that also watch this show outside the Philippines, that the Philippines actually this is one of their big sports. There is billiards. The Philippines has been doing extremely well in the last couple of decades. They're in billiards, especially with Efren Reyes being known as the greatest of all time. So a lot of people there are trying to follow in his footsteps there in the Philippines. So it's great to help support the youth because, I was talking about this with somebody in the United States once, that in the Philippines, good billiards players are a dime a dozen. They just can't get to the tournaments because they don't have the money to travel and to do everything. But they're more than just a few great players. There's a ton of great players in the Philippines. So helping those guys to get to tournaments and so forth. Now, speaking of, young children and so forth, we're going to, before we get going here in the news, there was something that I wanted to talk to you about because you are a very worldly guy, Dan. And this is the issue of having babies. And we were talking about this in the last show, and we've talked about it in previous shows about, for instance, Japan and Russia. They're shrinking. They're getting less people. And, they have programs now to try and get people to have babies because their populations are shrinking. Well, this week, I learned something. Actually, it was week before last, came out. A big story came out. There's another country that's shrinking, and that is China. Now, a lot of you are going, what? China? Doesn't China have the most people in the world? They do, but in this past 2022, they had more deaths than they had births. So China only increased by 850,000 people. Now, that sounds like a lot, but when you're looking at a country with 1.4 billion people in the country, So a lot of people are trying to speculate is why is China shrinking? You know, was it the COVID virus? Was that, of course, we'll never know how many people in China got the COVID virus. They're never going to tell us that. They're never going to tell us that. But, you know, China, you know, before their population was growing too fast. They didn't have enough food to feed all the people they had. And so they, you know, in 1949 they had 540 million people, and in 1980 they had almost a billion people. So the Communist Party, knowing how they are, they came up with this idea for the one-child policy, and they did that for 35 years. And then in 2016 they're like, okay, all right, no more of that. You can now have two. And then this past year, in 2022, they changed it to 3. So because they are not making enough kids. Yeah.
And that child policy was as recent as only like maybe 10, 15 years ago, where, I mean, there were, when I was in the U.S., I met I had a few Chinese friends that were actually, they escaped China because they didn't want, because, you know, they wanted more children. And so they, you know, and they were escaping China so that they could keep their children. And so that's not even 10 years ago that those policies were enacted. So, you know, and then now it's the reverse of that. And I just wonder if the whole, I mean, of course, the growing senior population would attribute the, you know, more deaths.
This was the next thing.
And I just kind of, it's like a scale that goes from, you know, the growing senior population that affects the worldwide or the entire nation's population with more deaths. People are getting older in groups, you know, and then so, but the decrease in childbirth is kind of, I don't know if I want to use the word concerning, but it's, you know, it's something.
You know, it is concerning in a lot of ways, because China, I know, is looking at this and they're going, you know what, we need to do something about this. The same way that they did back in 1980 when they were like, oh, shoot, we have too many people. And now they're worried, I think, because if the population continues to shrink, they're not going to, the workforce is going to get smaller in China. And that's how China went through their super economic development, was they had such a great workforce. And what if that workforce starts to shrink? What are they going to do? So they're trying to think about, oh my goodness, what are we going to do now? We have to figure this out. And, you know, here's something else I'd like for you to comment on, is the fact that, and we said this on the show before, you know, when people could only have one child, I mean, if you had 2 children, it was a big deal. They would take your parents' house. I mean, that's right. It was a really big deal if you had another child and you didn't have a permit to have that child. And so people wanted to have boys because, you know, when you get older, women don't do as much as the men do. The men are the breadwinners and so forth. So if you wanted somebody to take care of you when you were old, you know, if you had a daughter, she'd be married off to another family, and then there'd be nobody to take care of you. So everybody just wanted to have boys. So the abortion issue was huge there. So if they could find out that they were about to have a girl, they would abort the fetus and wait until they had a boy. And now there's too many men. They have too many men in ratio to women.
Too many less females, less births. And then, of course, here's the other factor as well. There's a lot of females that just don't want to have babies. They want to follow and chase their careers. They don't want to get stuck being a housewife. I mean, there's that whole, you know, and who can blame? You know, I mean, the old school traditional like concept of women are they're on this earth to bear children. So, you know, that's kind of archaic, you know, and so that's, I mean, so, and this is what happens in Korea as well. You know, a lot of the Korean females, they're like, no, I don't want to get married and have. I mean, I spent 8 years in college to pursue this education, and have a degree, and then now after all that, I'm just gonna
I'm gonna stay home. I'm gonna stay home and raise babies. Yeah, it's the same way in China. I mean, these women. You know, if you have a woman out of wedlock, and you know, you can't. I mean, the ratio to men to women working in China is incredibly skewed. there are so fewer women able to work in China than there are men. And I think this is something that women, now that there has been so much economic development in China, they're trying to squeeze their way in. I don't want to have a baby. I'm trying to get into this, to the workforce right now, which leads me to another story, which also I think you might be interested in this. Is that, the Philippines has a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's 116 million people.
117 million.
Yeah, it's a lot of people in here. There are 3 babies born in the Philippines every minute. So while we've been talking here, 30 babies have been born in the Philippines. So congratulations to all the women. Congratulations to all the women who just had a baby. But did you know, and okay, I might have got this wrong in a previous show, but now I've really studied it because I was looking at this China thing. The Filipino population has been shrinking.
Yeah.
It has been shrinking.
That was it. It went from 0.9% decrece.
Yeah, they had 10 years ago,
like
they had 100, they registered 1.7 million versus
million.
In 2019, 1.6, and last year, 528. So, it's interesting. It's the lowest. 2021 was the lowest population growth in the Philippines since 1947. And before, I had said that during the pandemic that there was nothing for people in the province to do except and so they were having way too many babies. They were having a lot of babies. That turned out to be incorrect. If you look at the numbers now that are coming out are showing that in the Philippines right now, in the last 50 years ago, where people were having between 6 and 10 children, now they're having 2 to 3 children or 1 to 2 children. Yeah. And they're having less babies now, and so the actual number of children being produced in the Philippines is starting to shrink. And what is the reason? What is the reason why that is?
I mean, it could be the younger generation now watching the older generation. There's maybe an unknown movement mentally of the younger generation just refusing to get caught up in that. I mean, what could it be?
I mean, in my opinion, I think education has a lot to do with this. I mean, before there was no family planning in the Philippines. You just have, you have a baby every year until you can't have babies anymore. And now they're starting to plan, I think. And just like you were saying before, as in China, the economic situation is changing. And especially now, before COVID, I think, they were making, it's funny that before COVID, there were more pregnancies, and now after COVID, there are less pregnancies. And I think that, that might have, something to do with COVID and staying home and, people spending more time on the internet, not going out as much. And I think in a lot of times, in my opinion, in the Philippines, they're starting to see, as women are getting more educated, they're starting to see that children cost a lot of money. And if it costs much for this one, and I have 2 and I have 3, how am I going to pay for all this? And then they have to leave the province and go into the city and work and leave the children behind with the grandparents. So I think that's why, birth control, it's different now. People are learning about birth control like they never did before. And that might be some of the factors.
I agree with you. The awareness is growing as well, and I think the younger generation is seeing it's a culmination of watching their parents grow up in struggle and in poverty, and then so they I think that awareness is becoming more of an action than it was before, because a lot of times I talk to a lot of the younger kids that are having babies. I mean, kids having babies really. And it was not really like, I mean, in different cultures, like having a baby is a big deal, right? But in Philippines, it was like, I had a baby. And it was like, oh, it's not really like a life. I mean, it is a life-changing event, but it wasn't taken as, because they watched their elders have more babies and more babies, and it's like, oh, okay, we're having a baby, cool, right?
But that's when you could buy a chicken for 60 pesos. I mean, that was a different time. Food was cheaper, housing was cheaper.
I agree. Yeah. One thing else too that you and I talked about personally before is like and I never forget when you always say they never die. Well, when they found out that they don't have to go through these extremities to actually live and survive. Like when COVID happened, there was a lot of work stopped in the sex industry and everything else, and a lot of these girls realized that they can live in the province and have an okay life without having to go do all these crazy things. And they're like, and it's like, so that awareness was like, and then remember when we were talking about like, oh, they always have this like extreme, like, oh, if you don't send me money, we're gonna starve to death. And you were like, they never die.
They never die.
I didn't.
Somehow they find a way. Somehow there's a way.
But yeah, that always hits me. Like when you telling me, Dan, they never die. Don't worry, they never die.
But here again, the stuff that happened during the pandemic, all the bars closed, and the women had to go back to some of these women you're talking about had to go back to the province, and they realized, you know what, I could work, I can have a job, I don't have to do this anymore. I have the education,
right?
But and I think that had a lot to do with the women are starting to look at themselves as like, we're more than just people that sit back in the province and make babies. We can actually do things. We can go out and work and be in the workforce.
Really agree with that.
So anyway,
there was a huge cultural transition with what happened. It really was. It was. I mean, not just Philippines, worldwide. But
yeah, worldwide. I mean, this is we're talking about China and the Philippines and Japan. This is happening everywhere. I mean, people are living longer and having less births. The world is, even though the population is getting bigger, but it's actually getting bigger, smaller. So it's shrinking in a lot of ways. It's getting bigger mostly because people are living longer. So anyway, this is going to be an interesting. We can revisit this again, Dan, in 20 years if we're still alive, and see what happened. But I want to, speaking of things that are going on in the world right now, some big stuff that's going on right now. In the U.S., the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, he had to postpone his trip to China. And, this was not due to weather or a threat from Taiwan. It had to do with something really big, a spy balloon.
Yeah. They just found one in the Philippines. Just 6 hours ago. They discovered one in the Philippines. Apparently, I don't know.
This is, just a crazy story that's been all over the news this week, so we have to talk about it a little bit, that this large, giant balloon was drifting over the U.S., and somewhere on that balloon, it says Made in China. And in case you didn't know, you can't fly stuff over the United States. You got to have permission to fly something over the United States.
Sure.
So the same balloon they found flying over Latin America is another balloon almost exactly identical to this. And the Chinese are like, come on, Americans, this is not a surveillance spy balloon. It's a weather balloon. Yeah, it's a research ship.
That it was an accident.
Our balloon just deviated. It just deviated off course, very far off course. China said it regretted the accident, called it a force majeure, and I haven't heard that word in a long time, which means, it's a French term. It means circumstances beyond China's control. I'm surprised that China would use that word since it's French, but anyway, so I mean, it's possible maybe this happened, although, because if the Chinese were sending a spy balloon over, do they think the United States would not see it? I mean,
it's just kind of really odd, isn't it? I kind of looked into that, and I found out that since 2021, there were 366 incidents, of which 163 were actually, of the 366 in the United States, 163 were actual spy balloons.
Spy balloons.
Balloons. Why balloon, right? Like, we have satellite. We have right? Like all this other technology, why a balloon? You know, it's like me using a landline phone with a dial on it. Like, why a balloon, right?
Yeah, I mean, as far as this is why the United States did not shoot it down right away, because they're like, well, it's not really doing that much. I mean, they have satellites. China has satellites going over us all the time. The only difference between a satellite and a balloon is a balloon can be stationary for a lot longer. It can see way of life situations, whereas a satellite shoots over it like every 90 seconds. So, but that was an interesting thing about it. Like, why did the United States not shoot that thing down right away? And one of the reasons was it's really big, and they weren't sure if you shoot it where it's going to come down. And they didn't want to, that would be the thing if they shot it down and it went into someone's house or killed somebody or whatever. So, but they did, that's the thing, as we say, because I'm from North Carolina, and North and South Carolina, we're just like, you don't want to be bringing your Chinese balloons here. So as soon as it floated over the Carolinas, they shot it down. I think it was
with a missile, by the way,
with one of those sidewinders. They flew an F-22 up and blew it away with a Sidewinder missile.
It wasn't like a couple of country bumpkins come out with their sawed-off shotguns, right? Oh!
So I was joking about this because my cousin lives there, and I said, I'm surprised people didn't just come out and load some buckshot at it. It's only what 80,000 feet above the surface of the planet. But they finally blew this thing out of the sky, and it went down in 47 feet of water. So they are going to retrieve it, and they are going to look at it and see what China's up to.
Right. Is there anything left of that after they blew it up with a missile, though?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's not like a couple of hillbillies going, look there, what's that? I don't know, huh? Shoot it down.
I mean, the fact that the military released an F-22 and shot it down with a Sidewinder missile, which, I mean, they could have literally shot it down with one bullet, I think. Although those things are made of metal. They're made of metal. I mean, I guess they're fairly strong because they're up there pretty big. But it's huge. I didn't realize how big those balloons are, but they are really big. So it went down in the ocean. They just, they didn't want to take the chance. But Biden... and here is President Biden, because he's going to get all kinds of flack from the Republicans if he doesn't immediately say shoot it down. So he said right away, we got to shoot it down as soon as possible. And he came out and did a press conference yesterday. Hey, I'm a tough president. We got to shoot down these China things. So that's what they did.
I gave the order.
I gave the order. So, it's not going to give Donald Trump a chance to say, well, see, Biden, he doesn't even realize that the Chinese are, so finally, hopefully this balloon issue is out of the way. But there are issues right now with China that are causing a lot of people. Now, I know we've been on China for a lot here, but, China has been doing some things in the recent weeks that have been making the news. And they, it's this, the enemy, my enemy is my friend. And, as we know, of course, Russia has been going through some economically really tough times because they went to war with the Ukraine. Right. And the entire world condemned it pretty much, but not so much China. Yeah. China has basically said, okay, wait a minute. We didn't know that they were going to declare war, but we're not going to condemn the war because as far as China is concerned, if you want to take over a country that you feel belongs to you, that's your business.
Right.
Because China doesn't want to seem, hypocritical because, they got something similar going on.
Well, I mean, they want to stay amicable to everybody.
Yeah, I mean... and a lot of people are speculating, Russia's going through a very bad economic time, and so is China. This zero COVID policy, it really hurt China in a lot of ways. And I think that's why they're keeping an open door to Russia. And I think that makes people nervous.
Yeah. The recent news is that, they're using the word warm, right? Like China warming up with Russia, and like they had this, they had the meeting of the powers, China and Russia, and it was a warm meeting. Warm. They're using that word like. like they're courting each other or something,
It's
right?
like, why are these guys so smiling at each other? And why is China all of a sudden criticizing NATO? Why are they doing that? It just makes people go, you know what? This is not something we really want to see right now. And I know, and you can tell me if this is true. I mean, China does not, they're like Russia. They don't want to see the United States dominating the, economy of the world. And,
Sure.
they wanted to be the ones that are kind of dominating, just like Russia. But unfortunately, China's going through some big economic problems right now. And I think they're, we want to be friends with anybody we can.
But is China, apparently China economically, militarily, are assisting Russia? Are they not?
Now, this is a big issue. Is China selling lethal arms to Russia? And China says no. China says we are not. We're not doing that. But this is going to be an issue. How much assistance are they giving to Russia during this war? And
not just with military weapons, but economically, right?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think they're funneling, they're helping. I mean, they bought all that unused oil.
Sure.
Russia, China sent 2,000 participants to be in those patrol drills that Russia had.
That's right.
Across the Sea of Japan and the East China Sea. So I think that it's obvious that they are having, there's certain deals that they have that we don't know about.
Right, because what it really comes down to is what's going to be the economical gain for China if they do or if they don't help Russia in future, or maybe not immediately, but that's where the immediate actions are planned out for the outcome later on. How does this, if we do this, if we assist them here, how does that affect our relationship later on, and how is that economically advantageous for us? But because that's what it all comes down to.
For China,
right?
Yeah, China's all about the money.
Right.
What's that comedian? That comedian who's Chinese now that comes out and says, "You know what Chinese people like? They like money. That's what they like." Hey, this might have, this is a story that came out, I think, 2 days ago, that the Philippines says that it's going to expand the U.S. access even further in regards to military bases. They're going to up it to, the Philippines is going to give the United States 4 more locations for military bases, bringing it up to 9 bases throughout the Philippines. The United States has been studying all this.
Currently 5 now. There's currently 5 active, right?
Yeah, until yesterday or day before yesterday, when they added 4 more, and that will bring it to 9. Right. 9 total bases, as far as I understand it, that the United States will be able to have access to here in the Philippines, because the United States has been gradually expanding its stuff in the Indo-Pacific because, and here's the number one reason. What is China going to do next? Yeah.
Well, Philippines has always been a strategic location physically, in Asia. But and this is the reason that the majority of those bases in the Philippines are air bases. They're air bases. So,
Philippines is the best location. That's why everybody wants it. That's why you can't buy land here. It's the best location. Foreigners can't buy land. It's the best strategic location in Southern Asia. And so everybody, this is, the United States had their agreement now in 2016. That agreement kind of got a little sketchy.
Yeah.
But it seems to be, with the new president in the Philippines, it seems to be coming back in full force.
So. I think that this is a positive thing, really. The U.S. officially left in 1992, right? The military officially in 1991 they were given 1 year to exit, and that transition went very smooth, really, in 92 when they finally pulled everybody out. Right? It wasn't, disastrous.
It wasn't Afghanistan, put it that way.
I didn't want to go there. But you went there, okay. But yeah, But I think ever since then, up to the present, this had to come, and especially with the state of the world now, as far as world security. I would see this as a good thing, a positive thing.
I mean,
I think it needed to happen a lot earlier.
I mean, I think it's the Philippines made a very good decision. Now, China on Friday, I think, released something that said the Philippines has escalated tensions in the region and endangered regional peace and stability.
Yeah.
It's like the typical China response.
Right. Me and Eric became friends, and Joe's not happy about it. Right.
I mean, there's other things going on. I mean, the United States has there's bases in Japan now. They made some kind of deal with India. They built a new base in Guam that holds 5,000 Marines. I mean, the United States is really, and this base in the Philippines that they're going to give them now is 200 miles off the coast of Taiwan. So I'm sure that the Chinese, they're going to make some kind of big statement about this, because this is not something that they're very happy about.
There's always been the promise with the U.S. that they would always protect and maintain Taiwan's sovereignty. So,
yes.
And so, and a good thing that at least there seems to be they're keeping their word in show anyway. And
we adopt the one China, one country policy. However, if you touch Taiwan, we're going to shoot at you. So that's the thing.
Yeah.
But speaking of wanting to shoot people, I got to transition here really quick because I want to get into this.
Sure.
Shooting people. There's a guy named George Santos in the United States that we have been talking about every week because he keeps coming into the news over and over and over, and he's just so fun to talk about. Here again. Now this is, I shouldn't say that. You shouldn't say people you want to shoot, but a lot of people I think do, because as you may know, he got elected into the U.S. Congress, one of the most powerful Congresses in the world, and he cannot tell the truth about anything in his life. Anyway, we've talked about him, so a lot of people already know about it because we've talked about him here on the show a bunch of times. Like, he's lied about literally everything you can think of. I don't want to go through the list again because it's everything you could think of. But he's got other problems this week. He owes traffic tickets in New York and Florida, coming to around $3,400. So that's big news. He also has claimed, somebody has come out and said that he claimed, or they have a video of this, he was a producer of the Broadway production of Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark.
They have a Broadway production of that?
That's why I just love to talk about it. I love to talk about it because the lies are just like, why would you lie about this? I mean, it's just, what? Why would you lie about this? But he's got big trouble. I mean, yes, okay, we're talking about all the things that he loves to tell stories about. But right now, he's a congressman, so he needs to get a staff together. No one will work for him. He has like 3 people in his staff in Congress. Usually they have like 20 to 25, but nobody will work for him. And part of the problem is people that come in to interview with him and talk to him, they've been bringing in secret tape recorders, recording stuff he says, and giving it to the media. So he had a big problem with some guy came in, recorded him saying that he lied to everybody, and he didn't, he feels bad, that he admitted to lying to everybody, even though he won't admit that. But there's another issue, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Not that you would ever be following this story, but this veteran had a dog. He had one of his dog that he had, which was his guide dog, whatever. And the dog was dying, and he needed to have it, so he took it to the vet. The vet said, "We can fix your dog. However, it's going to cost a whole lot of money. You need to raise this kind of money." Here's this guy, George Santos. He has a nonprofit group. He can help you raise the money. So the guy called George Santos. This is before he was elected. And George Santos put out a GoFundMe page, and he raised the money. And then he never gave the money to the veteran.
Oh,
he kept it.
God.
He kept it. So the dog died.
Oh.
The veteran felt like killing himself because his dog died. And now this veteran last week was on TV telling the story. And so now I mean, it's a sad thing. It makes you really mad. And the reason he did it supposedly is because he thought he could get more votes because people see that he did something for animals. Anyway, now he may be up for fraud. So they may be coming after him for stealing that $3,000 that he raised to get that dog fixed.
Only 3,000. I mean, this is a sign of the times, though. What's not even concerning is George Santos himself, is the people that are voting him in and him staying in office, him staying in where he's
I can't believe that he's still in office.
This is the most concerning part of George Santos. It's not George Santos himself. It's the fact that he's in a position where he's at, and he's still in the position that he's at.
And he won't leave.
What is happening? What is going on that something like that could happen?
Why will the Republicans not come out and say, this guy's got to go? He's got to go. And I know why, because they want the seat. They want to keep the seat, and they're worried that a Democrat will win if they have to throw that guy out. But I mean, he's making them look horrible. He's making them look really bad, and I cannot believe that they're keeping this guy in there. But anyway,
you have him on both sides. You have him on both sides, and it's just well, I mean, that's the most concerning thing. And I mean, alternatively, the U.S. is still, to me, the greatest, and it's still because of the people. But on the flip side to that, because of the people, you still have clowns like this. It's unreal.
We still have, like I said, clowns like that. We have a woman that is in Congress that came last week, this Bobart woman from Colorado, who said that we need to change the rule in Congress that we can carry guns into Congress. We can carry pistols, loaded pistols into Congress. And the Democrats are like, are you insane? Did you not see what happened recently with this? They rushed, the Capitol building. What if we had guns in here? People be just shooting. And I just, it's hard to believe that these people are getting voted in who basically are not really seem to be interested in policy so much as they're interested in getting, TikTok videos and, little snippets of things where they can be famous.
That's the sign of the times, grandstanding. It's funny you say that because just yesterday when I was flying out and flying into Philippines at the airport in Incheon in Korea, they have this window with all of the items that are not allowed on the plane, and at the very end, I made a video of it just because it was funny. They have a gun there, right? And I'm like, okay, like all of the items that you can't take with you through the gate and on the airplane, and they have a picture of a gun, and I'm thinking, it's like 2023. Who in their right mind would even think that they bringing a gun? Why would you even have to have that, right? And then but wait, we don't even have guns in Korea. Like we don't.
The reason they have that gun right next to a bottle of water is because of the United States. Because in certain states in the United States, you can conceal a weapon. And, you got to tell people, by the way, you can't bring this on the airplane, you idiot. So get rid of your water bottle and get rid of your gun because you can't bring them on the plane. We got to tell you that.
Because you never know when you might see a Chinese spy balloon and you have to shoot it down. That's why you have to carry one.
You have to shoot it down.
Oh, shit.
So anyway, speaking of, I don't know how to segue to this, but I wanted to talk a little bit about something else, which Filipinos they do not have to worry about at all, and that's cold weather. This is a big issue this week because in the Philippines, what does it do? It rains. That's what it does. But in other parts of Asia right now, there's a problem because the temperatures are hitting ridiculous numbers in different places in Asia. And I wanted to bring this up because you're from one of those places.
That's right.
Where it is freaking cold. And, it was, what was it, a month ago where we were talking about bomb cyclones, these crazy things that are happening, these extreme colds in the United States where the temperatures are breaking. Well, last month in the United States in January, it was like the warmest January, like on record. But those days are over in the United States because now, get ready, because in the United States right now, -34 Celsius today. which is weather that can freeze your eyeballs out.
That's funny. I'm talking about that 2 weeks ago in Korea.
Yeah, I mean, northern China, negative 53 degrees Celsius. In Japan, 4 people died. And, the cabinet secretary is coming out. We have this is like just a crazy, weird cold snap. South Korea, cold warnings coming out over the TV saying, listen, people need to stay inside.
And I would tell you firsthand, I was in negative 20 Celsius, but with wind chill factors about negative 34, somewhere around there. And my dumb self decided to get on my scooter to go down the street, and literally I like my eyeballs I thought was frozen. I could only blink like 3 times because my eyeballs literally I ran home and stayed indoors.
We talked about this before on the show. If you breathe in, like take a deep breath, like there's a possibility you can damage your lungs.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
In Siberia last week, in Russia and Siberia, it was negative 62.7 degrees.
Yeah, I mean, if you throw a glass of water at someone, that's attempted murder.
You can make a weapon out of water. But this is why this is talk about like what's going on with the climate, and humans are going to start having to move closer to the equator because this place where humans are living now, like for instance New York and South Korea and Russia, humans don't have fur. We can't live in these places, and the issue has come out as to why this is happening and why has this not happened before and why is this happening now. And, we talked about the polar vortex, and I love talking about the polar vortex because I like just saying it, this spinning cold air that goes on the top of the earth, and it's supposed to stay there, and it just stays there. And because of this heating up of the polar ice caps, it's starting to become unstable. And when it becomes unstable, pieces of it get down into the jet stream, and the jet stream brings it down into South Korea and Japan and China. And then all of a sudden, it's negative 50 degrees.
Yeah, it's concerning.
It's just, it's insane.
I've been in cold before in Korea, and this last week was pretty extreme. Like, I have motorcycles.
I know that you don't really ride the motorcycles in winter.
No, but I tell
just so
you can't move the motorcycles, you can't sit on the seat, because what happens if you sit on the seat leather and the upholstery cracks and breaks.
Yes.
That's the amount of cold, you just can't touch it. The seat will crack and break, and then it's like $500 to replace all of that. So you got to leave it where it's at.
All right. Besides the fact that you can die from breathing in the cold air, also worry about your motorcycle seat cracking. In Mount Washington, in New Hampshire, they recorded a wind chill factor of negative 108 degrees Fahrenheit this past week. That may be the coldest ever recorded in the United States ever since they've been doing this. So I just thought it was a very interesting story that how cold it was. And speaking of giving cold shoulders, Elon Musk this week has also made the news. And I know how much we love talking about Elon Musk. So not only did he let Donald Trump back on Twitter, but he also is giving the Philippines high-speed internet.
Oh. Giving, I think you misworded that, giving, but go ahead.
As soon as I said that, I'm like, I think I misspoke here. He is not giving it. He is selling it, because right now, Elon Musk has been losing money like crazy. But this week they did announce... the delay. Yeah, he broke a world record, which we'll talk about in a second. SpaceX Starlink is behind this whole project. They were delayed for a little while because of whatever. Henry Syed Jr. is in on this thing, and they are going to be delivering satellite systems to households that can log on and get internet to far-reaching parts of the Philippines where internet is hard to find. And of course, the question being on everybody's mind, how much is it going to cost? And here's where the problem comes in, because that satellite is 34,000 pesos. And and you got to get it installed. And then you have to pay 5,500 pesos a month, but you can get 200 megabytes per second or 200 gigabytes per second. Oh. Anyway, it's a lot of internet from a satellite that is spinning around the earth.
Right. I mean, is that a necessity, number one? Right? It's really a necessity. But interestingly enough, like, in Korea, we have like top internet. Like it's fabulous and it's cheap. It's cheap. Our internet's cheap. I pay like 1,000, not even 1,000 pesos a month for unlimited internet in my house.
Yeah,
right.
And in Korea, which is actually better than the United States. In the United States, where I live, is very, very remote. Internet is instantaneous. If you go onto it, it's instant, and it costs like $50 a month. I don't, so it's amazing internet. Whereas, in the Philippines right now, internet's a big problem because it's slow and it doesn't work sometimes, and it's very expensive. And so when I read that Elon Musk was bringing internet to the Philippines, I'm like, oh man, this is great. But the question is, right now, I mean, 34,000 pesos, can I buy that for like the whole neighborhood?
Yeah.
That's what I need to know.
That's all like 2 years subscription for me in where I'm at. Like, what?
That's a lot. I mean, I understand that Elon needs money because also he broke the record for the most personal wealth ever lost by an individual at $165 billion. Of course, Elon says, no, you guys are reading this wrong. You're not doing this right. But, he also broke the record for the most lost in a single month.
But going back to that, why Philippines, right? And people would think, well, why Philippines? And there's a big misconception, like with a lot of my friends, that the country is poor. Philippines is not poor, okay? It's like the fourth largest economy and it's the largest, fastest growing economy in Asia, Indonesia, and so like a lot of my friends think they're poor. It's like they're not poor, man. Like I've seen more wealth in the Philippines and like luxurious wealth. That is
true, but let me make a caveat here. For all the cars that the Lamborghini dealership sells there, the split between the people who have a lot of money in the Philippines and the people that have no money in the Philippines is there is a massively discrepancy between the number of people who are below the poverty line and the people who are super duper rich. Now, the one thing that has happened in the Philippines that I've noticed in the last 5 years since I've been here is the middle class is starting to get slightly bigger, but not that much bigger. Now, the fact that Elon Musk is like, we're going to bring this internet to the places that don't have internet. The places that don't have an internet are the places that also don't have money, which is part of the reason why Globe and Smart don't want to put internet there, because how they're going to make their money. And that's a problem. Now, if they were bringing this to poor parts of the Philippines for free, that would be amazing. That would be great. But this is who's going to buy this satellite internet is what I want to know. Are you going to put it in Makati? Why do we even need it in Makati? I mean, what we needed is, places in Mindanao. This is where it's needed most. So this is why I wanted to ask a question to Elon about the satellite system and how it works. Because I got a problem. I got a problem with that. And besides, Elon broke the record for losing the most money. So I know he needs some money. He needs to make some money. But where another record might be broken this week? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. We're getting over into sports now. He has the scoring record. A record that many people thought could never be broken ever. at 38,387 points in a career. And the reason being, I used to watch basketball back when Kareem played. Back then, we didn't do defense. There wasn't a lot of defense. You wave your hands, and the guy comes in and shoots, and a guy can, make the, he can score a lot of, the games were like 120 points on the average. But that changed a lot. That was set in 1984. But now there's a player who's come out, and he is just 63 points away from doing this. Some guy named 𝗡𝗲𝘄𝘀. Is that his name? I'm just kidding. His name is LeBron James. I'm making very bad jokes today. He is just 63 points away from breaking the all-time scoring record of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he may do it this coming week. Because he averages 28, 30 points a game, something like that. So I thought that was good news for our sports. We always do sports here, but we don't actually do actual sports. We just do interesting stories. And I thought that was the most interesting story of the week. The fact that LeBron James may break the scoring record. But it's just interesting. While I was looking this up, I also looked up some other stats that you might find fascinating. The most points ever scored in a basketball game was 100 points. Wilt Chamberlain scored that in 1962.
Sure.
Kobe Bryant almost at 81. Kobe Bryant almost broke that record. But did you know that in a high school game, the great Lisa Leslie, who was known for, I think she won, I don't know how many gold medals she won, she scored 101 points in a game in high school. And she was just 3 points away from breaking the all-time high school scoring record until the other opposing team just left the court. They just walked off. because Lisa Leslie scored 101 points. You know how many points the entire rest of her team scored in that game? One.
What?
1 point. Their team scored 102 points. And 23 years later, Epiphany Prince, another high school player, broke the record by scoring 113 points. Then a guy, Danny Heater, I need to point that out, scored 135 points in a high school game in 1960. And in the Philippines, in 1923, Luis Salvador scored 116 points in the 1923 Far Eastern Games for the Philippines, which is something I found very fascinating. And you know who they scored that game against? China.
Wow.
How about that?
Philippines is big for basketball. They love
That's basketball. Basketball, billiards, and boxing. But I couldn't wait. There's another record that I wanted to bring up, and this was done in 1974. A young Swedish boy was in a game. He was in a regional basketball game, and he scored 272 points in a single game. And guess what the final score? Guess what the final score of this game was? The final score of this game was 272-0. So I can't imagine how bad the other team had to be in this regional basketball game.
You only play as good as your competition, right?
So I don't understand why somebody has not staged a basketball game like this. But this was what year was this again? 1974. 1974. This young Swedish boy did this. So I'm sorry why somebody hasn't cheated. Which it brings me to another great story, which I wanted to get your opinion on. Is technology has been great for education, especially during the COVID time, COVID pandemic. I mean, think about this. I mean, during COVID, what would we have done without the iPad as far as education goes? I mean, that changed everything because everybody could do tests at home and so forth. But as I've said before, I wish I could have lived during this time, because when I was growing up and I was in school, we all wanted to cheat because we didn't want to study. So we would write stuff on our wrists so we could cheat during a test. But now cheating has gotten to a whole new level. There was a big issue in the United States a couple of years ago with cheating on the SAT. A lot of people went to jail. Some very famous people went to jail because of that. Because right now, the best way to cheat is to Google it. But how do you Google it when you're trying to take a test and people are walking around? So, in any way, there was a big story that came out of Singapore. Singapore has a big test called the GCE O-level examination, which is like the SAT. I'm sure the Koreans have a very similar test, which you take it in your last year of high school and decides where you're going to go to college, what you're going to do in life. And it's a very hard test. And, a lot of people, fail it. But there was a massive cheating thing going on. This 57-year-old Chinese woman was convicted and sentenced to 4 years in this elaborate cheating scandal that they had there in Singapore, where they used body cams and earphones and Bluetooth devices to cheat on a test. It's incredible how they did this. In a minute, we'll go through it. We'll talk about how they did it. But they were paid 8,000 Singapore dollars per person to do this by this Chinese man who wanted these kids, these 6 students, to do well on the exam. So the deal was, if they didn't pass the exam, then they got refunded. But all of them supposedly passed the exam because they would tape. What they did was they had somebody in there. They taped a smartphone to their body. Or each way would put so they would use these flesh-colored earphones that they had made to feed the answers into the students' ears through the phone that they had taped. And there was a person in the test as well, taking the test, who would pose, and she had a hidden camera hidden on them, and they would look at the test, and then they would send the answers to the phone that was taped to the body, which go in the headphones. So it's really amazing. Anyway. This person got
Mission Impossible stuff.
This person got 4 years in jail for 27 counts of cheating in Singapore. So they were supposed to report to jail, and they disappeared. This Chinese woman. So now this person is on Interpol. They are on a worldwide Interpol search to get this woman back and put her in jail. So along with murderers and international drug lords and billion-dollar fraudsters, this Chinese woman is now on the top most wanted in Interpol for this cheating scandal there in Singapore.
But this happened but the actual cheating scandal happened. She was actually fined or jailed before for that.
Well, this happened. This didn't happen just now. This happened years ago. Right. The trial happened. She was found guilty, and she was supposed to show up last week, and she didn't show up. And so immediately it went to Interpol, and now it's all over the place. She's got her picture is on every Interpol place.
And this happened actually in 2016. However, before this one, she was already convicted prior to that for another similar incident. And so, once a cheater, always a cheater.
Once a cheater, always a cheater. And I have now admitted that I cheated when I was in junior high school of trying to write mathematic things on my hand. However, my hands were so sweaty because I was so nervous that it didn't work.
I'm going to tell you a quick story about Koreans cheating and how they do it very quickly.
I can't. Okay. You have to tell a story in 30 seconds.
Okay. They spin their pencils. It's a team effort. When the teachers are walking up and down the aisle, they have their time. If you ever see a Korean spinning their pencils to the right like that with flicking, that dude is a cheater. And then if the teacher's not coming, they flip the pencil the other way, counterclockwise. So you have this whole aisle of kids flipping pencils, and if you see them flipping pencils, if it's flipping to the clockwise, you can cheat. Everybody can look. And then if
Koreans are so much smarter than Americans.
The teacher's coming.
So much smarter than Americans. Anyway, speaking of cheating, we have to cheat. We're being cheated on time right now because we're out of time. But let me just say that I have had such a blast having a show here with Dan Kang. We're so happy that he came and joined us this week. So for me and Dan, we are way out of time here. Here on the World News Jam on DCR and RJTV. My name's Lecain, and we are out of here today. Everybody, please be safe this week, and we will see everybody next week. Talk to you then. Goodbye, Dan. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Bye-bye.
The views and